Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode, early morning episode. It's 6 a.m. right now. And I have literally awakened. So the title of today's episode is relatively esoteric, and it's going to require me to kind of animate the inner realms more than the norm. So anyways, let's dive into it. The might of the 7th Transcendent. And so, what is meant by multidimensional transits? You see, right now, we consider ourselves to be objective beings, and so our sense of transit is based on our external location, That means in this life, the human being is in some sense transitioning through different states of being, different states of physical existence. For example, today is a new state of my physical existence to my own self compared to yesterday. So it's about becoming sensitive to what is changing, but now more and more of the inner realms. The concept of the might of the 7th Transcendent, the title kind of like appeared to me out of nowhere, but it kind of related to certain memories I had. And you see, people, I feel, in front of their eyes, they have a common relatable experience. Behind their eyes, you perceive phenomenology that is not per se all physically visible and tangible. So right now, where these words are coming from, they're not just coming from me looking at what's in front of my eyes. It's as if what's in front of my eyes has entered an inner space where there is the interaction with an additional dimension of viewing. Okay? Everyone is like this. It's not just like one of us. It's built in the design that your inner realms, in some sense, give the momentum and the direction to your outer realms. You see, it's very interesting. The body is dressed in clothing, and the mind is dressed in language. And language is so far the greatest tool our species has come up with. That means what happens when creatures roam the earth? Languages develop. Languages are in some sense bridges between the inner eyes of people, between their inner dimensions. You see, right now, me and you and whoever's listening, we can all be in the same room looking at the same object. But if we were to look at certain inner phenomena, it wouldn't be the same. My inner realms differ from yours. Do you know? In regards to how it's animate, because we have different experiences and different DNA. Now, there are certain schools of thought that, for example, Rumi, the poet, this mystic poet, Sufi mystic poet, he says, you're not just a drop in the ocean. You're the entire ocean in the drop. So for me in this life, it was very interesting. It's kind of like I was born and I wasn't aware of my own individualism. And then I became aware of my own individualism, and there was a discomfort. And then I became aware of the external realms collectivity. Then I became aware of that ocean behind the eyes of man. That ocean behind the eyes of man is pretty much the resolution of directed and moving energy in space. That means once the basketballer throws the ball into the hoop and it goes inside the hoop, before the ball goes inside the hoop, important. After it has gone through the hoop, it finished its intention. The necessity of the action was completed. So this idea that you're living an individual life, it's kind of like your physical body is, as Manly P. Hall so profoundly said, it must be returned back to the elemental reality. And the individual consciousness that this physical existence of ours harbors, that also returns to that ocean again, as Rumi would say. We're all drops in an ocean. That means he's identifying And like pretty much when we look at human beings, we're like, okay, there's some sort of energy there, and there's some sort of consciousness there. So human beings are energy conscious of itself. Now, this energy that is conscious of itself through its direction animates destiny. It animates. It's like your strength suggests the destiny of how far you can lift up something, for example. So this idea of the might of the 7th Transcendent, we have to consider that it's not, I'm not saying it's pretty much acknowledged in certain monotheistic traditions. I feel in many traditions, religious tradition, monotheistic religious traditions, the idea is this, okay, that we are not in one parallel reality, we're in 7 actually, and there are 7 skies. And for example, at least as far as I know, in the Islamic context, the 7 skies crack. The sky, like as if the way the author of these ancient texts, monotheistic ancient texts, in some sense, it's as if the way, it's kind of like this, that when the apocalypse happens, the sky cracks down, and it's kind of like, in a strange way, before people creating the concept of a simulation, the definition of a simulation breaking down. Now, the 7th, I'm telling you, this episode it deviates a bit from reality more than usual because I want to share an emotion. I'm trying to give images to an emotion, and this emotion is like one step away from a sense of one's origin. I don't know how to say it. The might of the 7th Transcendent is when the mind completes its journey. Sometimes your body in this lifetime, I think it'd be kind of rare. Usually alright, let me see how I can say this. Just a second, folks. Looking for a song to hear. Imagine you have 7 different sunglasses on. And you're looking at the stars and you're like, I barely see anything. And as you take off these glasses, you get closer, these sunglasses, you get closer to the true nature of reality. And so it's kind of pretty much all that human beings have been doing, whether esoteric or not. It's been either veiling or unveiling. That's the business the human being is in some sense. Because language is evocational, it in some sense is a simulated act. That means these words weren't here from before, and from the silence they're simulated sound with a sort of symbol attributed architecture. I remember this is an experience I've never actually shared in these talks, but there was a time in 2014, not 14, 2013, and many people might not know, but I was very heavy into like going to the gym, and I even went to this fitness show. I have the picture somewhere, but and I remember one day just coming home, sitting at my living room, and just eating food. And it was the strangest experience where I felt in my inner realms, I perceived something in the space. So I don't know how many people are comfortable with this, But most people tend to treat their inner realms not in their physical, like most people are kind of in Rene Descartes' school of thought, where the mind and body have a dualism where they don't relate with one another. That means when a person has a thought, they don't consider that thought to be real unless they connect it to reality somehow, unless they express it somehow. So when I'm sharing this experience with you, I'm sharing it in the sense that I was just eating in my living room, but in my inner realms. With my mind's eye, I was perceiving something. And I perceived this light in a kind of, how can I tell you, this, some stories, it's like, think of it this way, think of it as if the universe is storytelling to your mind, you. And it was in that moment I perceived this kind of light, which immediately made me remember an emotion, and with that emotion came a memory. Sometimes when you get an emotion you've never got before, it has in your inner realms, there's an evocation of subjectivity that's new. That means a new subject can make a person emotional because it can evoke a new archetype from their unconscious. That means anytime I've listened to, for example, Alan Watts, Terence McKenna, there was something about their communication, there was something about seeing the new that brought with it new ways of expression. I don't know how to say it. You can say new archetypal freedoms. I pretty much perceived existence right now. Darkness is the inanimate, and light is where the animate is perceived. And light, most people consider that it's just creating the condition for human life, but we don't perceive the condition of human life being in light. And I feel that if you really look at the kind of morality of human beings, it's kind of like evil is darkness and good is light. And it's like whether the person knows good or bad, they know that an activity in the moment is either adding to the moment or taking away from the moment. You know, when I was younger in 2011, there was a moment where I was ignorant and I took away something from someone. I took away like something that it was something of regret. It took me a while to release myself from that regret. But it was as if I did something out of place because my inner realms felt insecure to how the outer realms were moving. You see, if you're a person who you want everything to happen the way you want, you're going to realize chaos is going to be like, hey, you think you're the only one in the room? Reality is more about feeling it out in every breath. With every inhalation, you're taking in the world. With every exhalation, you're in some sense reflecting back the world to itself. It's pretty much the dissolution of the individual archetype as the individual archetype becomes more collectively aware and then realizes that we right now think we're in a body, we have a body and we have our own mind. That's how we think. Because of our free will and how we maneuver this individual body, we are pretty much giving freedom to the self. We're saying before the world is free, the self is free. And the self is in some sense existing in this world. You know how many Buddhists consider the reincarnation of the self, the soul of the self, this transmigrating soul or witness, and they don't consider the transmigration of the soul of the universe. That means, I remember, guys, I found myself in India, Rishikesh. I went there for a couple months just living very simply in a remote ashram. And when I was there was this man in the dinner hall where everybody would go and eat vegetarian, and there was this man who you can tell from different people's eyes. This is very unique thing, but I'll say it. You can tell from a person's eyes if the inner realms are moving first or their outer realms. If their inner realms are moving first, the person has a strange trust. That means anytime you see a human being that trusts reality, it's because they have synchronized the synchronization of their inner realm and outer realms has become inseparable. That being has realized something where imagination and reality are no longer separate for them in their experience. Not that they're not separate. The inner experience of them is no longer separate. You know what that means? That means the categorizer of the categories is no longer separated from the category. So that means what you share with yourself yesterday is now. Or we can say the common denominator between who you were yesterday and who you are today and who you will be tomorrow is just now. The experience of life as a moment of now. It's all now. Okay, where else can it be? It's like, you know how many human beings have played hide and seek with truth only to realize the moment is present all at once and they're like, whoa, what have I been looking for? Why have I gone on an infinite game only to realize infinity is infinite? It's indefinite, you know? It's similar to the idea of the anthropos, which different people have different views on it. The anthropos, it's a concept it's the term. I'm not sure if the term is found, but the term son of man, it's found in the Hebrew Bible and in some sense in the Christian Bible. What I mean by this is that the idea of the first man, in India we had it to Manu. Manu was the first man in some sense, or Adi Yogi you can say. You know, the first yogi, the first transcendent. So this idea of the anthropos, it's pretty much man's divinity before he was sinned as his individualism. That means it's like the issue is not being an individual. The issue in the religious context is that you are an individual that has descended. If you look at evolution, it's an ascension. When you look at religious context of how the world was told, it's a descension. You know, that means it's as if it's one of those, I believe it's an authenticated hadith, but in the Islamic tradition, there's this view that the Prophet, in some sense, Prophet Muhammad of Islam, said that in some sense all those generations that will come after me will be worse. And it's as if, like, in some sense, it's a suggestion that while man is coming into existence and leaving existence and coming into existence, and think of all the people that have been born and walked this earth and extracted some experience from this terrain and have returned to the elemental grounds. The body is an experience. That means I treat my existence as an experience. There was a time where I would let my existence define my experience. But when you, especially as a human being, when you run more laps around the sun, you begin to see that life is not just about pursuing one-dimensional desire, but it's about multidimensional navigation. This multidimensional navigation means that when you're younger, your attention is more single-pointed. That means you are not aware of the other worlds that are going on while you're existing in your own world. The whole pursuit of knowledge is to see the edge of the world, which is beyond thought. So if somebody came to Mr. Within and they're like, what is the greatest teaching in this world? I would say the greatest teaching is the unknown. Is being content with the unknown. Anyone who's not content with the unknown, they don't trust their inner realm, so karma will be turbulent. It's like a driver. Think of karma as a car, like a vehicle. And the human being that doesn't trust their mind is like not trusting the steering wheel of this car, of karma. you see pretty much two things can move. That means effort. There's two ways of consideration. If you're a multidimensional being, what does that mean about the expression of your effort? And if you're just a singular dimensional being, what does that mean about the expression of your effort? That means if I think I'm a certain kind of person, how can I see other ways of my own archetypes? You see, there's two parts to life because we consider ourselves life forms. There's the life part, which is the awareness of your mind, and there's the form part, which is the designs and the shape of your body. And there will come a time, I feel, where all human beings will get this experience, and it will be on such a collective level. Right now, our separation defines us. There will be times in the future, because it's like a kind of sine wave in history. When you realize history repeats itself, it means the world has habits. We are moving into the dawn of the voices of fields. We are re-emerging as the Logos. We are re-emerging as the Logos. That means the individual archetype is evolving to such a level where it is feeling like the God of all that it has endured through. Your mind is not just some emptiness. When you close your eyes, you may think it's just a dark room, but you will see that there is phenomena moving in that darkness. And when darkness is separated from all the connotations that it has been given, once you free phenomena from your mind is freed from phenomena. That means you care for the world, and you will strangely see you are caring for your own heartbeat, because your heartbeat is beating for the future. The might of the 7th Transcendent is the evolution beyond an archetypal existence. It is the recognition that the full evolution of the individual is becoming now the movement of the world. So it's like you live as an individual. Think of it this way. A caterpillar gets to experience two-dimensional reality. The caterpillar is like, universe, why do I have so many legs and why am I so small? You know? And you suddenly see this caterpillar suffering like a caterpillar, only to realize that it will go into a cocoon and then emerge as a new being in three-dimensional space. That means the caterpillar had access to two-dimensional space, two-dimensional movement, and now has access to control and free will in three-dimensional movement. And this is why violence never made sense. Violence is like killing a caterpillar before it becomes a butterfly. You never know who people are until life brings them to the moment where they're meant for. Similar to the caterpillar going through a metamorphosis, and in the cocoon all the cells of the caterpillar die and the cells of the butterfly emerge. It's similar for the human form, that in some sense all the archetypes of the individual consciousness in some sense evaporate, and as the last archetype of the self, the anthropos within, the memory of the first man that is in some sense echoing within any sort of human design. That means if human design, we have a lineage, guys. We're not just ourselves. We are what we carry as well. That means if your ancestors were carpenters, you might suddenly feel like you have skill in carpentry, and you might try it and suddenly see you don't, and then suddenly you find that maybe like your grandchildren are like great carpenters. You know, somebody told me this, my cousin, when I went to Iran. I have a cousin named Amir Hossein, and When I was visiting Iran in 2016, he told me this interesting story. He told me, he was just saying his observation. He's like, there's 3 generations to the business. The first generation started the business, the second generation maintained and increased the business, the third generation didn't care about the business. That means anybody can check. If your father is the founder of something, your children will be, in some sense, will increase that finding. You know? That means your children, in some sense, will not care for the business your father cared about. And this is simply because of the change in the cultural program. You see, we are not just our design. We are when we entered the system and what we got exposed to, and every phenomenon the mind has ever recorded or taken in or consumed, any sort of vision it has in some sense accepted. Right now, we see the world and the self. We feel light is going in our eyes, and then the world is being seen. That means light is the precondition. Your mind is solar powered. Your soul is solar. SOULAR. The mixture of two of the most incredible words that have ever been invented on this planet: soul and solar. SOLAR and SOUL. So SOULAR, solar, is the idea. You can say that we can give a definition to this term, that it is how, before you can consider the concept of a soul, you need light, and light reveals the world in which we respond to. So that means the unknown is superior to the known. That means till the end of time, human beings cannot attain full certainty of their dimension because there is an unknown moment they're aware of. The unknown is kind of like how the system is designed, so no one system of knowing rules everything. The might of the 7th Transcendent is when all concepts of ascension and dissolution are observed in the same space. That is the great power of the human being. That is what, in some sense, all our ancestors were being a part of, but they could not pass down because it was not linguistic. And I find myself born at a time where language is something where I say the language wars. That means I would explain my childhood as me being a human being with a certain reality, and then this reality constantly being pushed and pulled by ideology outside of its sphere of experience. That means beliefs. Before people are bullied, they are in some sense bullied by their belief system into feeling that their activity is limited. Believing something or disbelieving it doesn't get you closer. It is only experience. That is why the educational system has not realized that the greatest value of knowledge is in its exploration. Children are being made soldiers for a war that they never fight. You know what that means? That means the educational system prepares them for a certain intensity, but that intensity doesn't contribute to the educational system, you know? That means the economical system is sabotaging our ability to increase knowledge. I feel we should pass down a law where we should see educational as a universal attempt. That means everything has to contribute to exploration. The best work that human beings can get paid for is recording their experience of how they are a psychological phenomenon. Dear listener, there will come a time where bodies will no longer roam the earth, for the bodies have become the earth. We're taking turns. The incarnate experience the self moving the world. The non-incarnate experience the world moving the self. Fear is a human idea. That means, like, I could totally animate a hilarious story. Imagine the first time extraterrestrials made contact with Earth. They're like human beings were like, no way. You know, extraterrestrials, they landed down and they were civilized enough, you know, and let's say the extraterrestrials wore suits and ties just to respect us so we don't freak out, you know, so we're shaking hands with extraterrestrials, you know, and they have suits and ties, let's say. These extraterrestrials, they come to humanity and they ask us one question: what do you fear? And imagine the leader of that handshake with the extraterrestrial looks at the extraterrestrial and gives the right answer. Imagine the extraterrestrials would have invaded if it was the wrong answer, but gives the right answer. We fear what we do not know. And the extraterrestrials like, all right, you guys are cool. You know? The thing is this, guys. It's a dynamic system. We're conditioned to treating it like characters in a story, but it's actually the whole story. You are your whole moment. Your mind is your whole moment. It has always been your whole moment. Your wakefulness is your being. Your lack of consciousness is your non-existence. It's not about motivation anymore. It's about what you see and what you choose to do with that. And you can choose. And that's the whole point of conscious activity. That you have to see freedom behind your eyes before you can see it in front of it. That means imagine all your desires were met, but do you know there's so many people that they desire things that if they actually got it, they couldn't confront it. It would destroy them. That means the human being, it is in like the character in in any video game. It's like it doesn't, you see, the only video games where you can say, you see, it's like what you are, if there isn't a chance of it being lost, you don't care to fight for a value. It's this big debate in philosophy that has been going on for eons, where beings have wondered, if we were eternal, what would we do? Where would be the motivation? You see, the concept of immortality and eternity, of enduring forever, this concept will dismantle the individual. Do you see what I'm saying? So once there is an experience prior to time, you can say that's a fifth dimensional observance. That means in scientific circles, I'll explain it to the fourth dimension. I take a different crossroad from the fifth dimension and onwards. In the scientific circle, we in some sense see that we are in three-dimensional space. Right now, you are like a three-dimensional video game character, and you have no idea what's moving this. That's the whole mystery of consciousness and the hard problem of consciousness. That there has come a sort of parallel in how we are individuals in society and how the unknown is moving the known. And it is the resurfacing of the spirit of the unknown. It's such a glorious time. You know, like I could tell you in 2014, I had this sort of kind of like inner boldness where I felt like I was born 400 years too soon. Do you know? Then I realized the future is moving the blood in our veins. When I realized that, it's like the connection with your future self. Think of it this way, it's like a playful thought experiment. You know, like a thought experiment is something that Albert Einstein did. So I think universally everybody likes Albert Einstein, you know. Even if you're a hairstylist, you like Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein was sitting in a post office. He conducted a thought experiment. His eyes closed and he saw himself move at the speed of light. Or at least he fathomed himself to do so. His imagination opened up a new possibility for how reality could be. He began to see the relationship of how energy, in some sense, was the relationship of light and mass. How, you see what I mean? It's like such a noble effort. That means sometimes when I see scientists bash mystics and yogis, I'm like, how do you not see the same nobility in Einstein closing his eyes and trying to see the laws of physical reality differently, and with that yogi going into the cave and closing his eyes like the Buddha and trying to see the whole conception of reality differently? It is the same honor. You see, that means pretty much when I look at human beings, I wonder how much are they aware of what they know and how much are they aware of what they don't know. And if I see a person who in some sense they feel they know more than the unknown, I don't say anything because that person is too much in their inner realms to be taken out. You see, for example, you see our society, civilization, our psychology is underdeveloped. I don't know what psychology departments are doing. Do you know somebody? We need like Diogenes. How do I say it? Friedrich Nietzsche, this philosopher, he in some sense he animated the story of Diogenes in the sense that Diogenes was the father of cynicism, this Greek philosopher. And the story is Diogenes held a lantern and he was running in the streets in the middle of the day. And as if he was looking for something, and people are just like, "Oh my God, what's this Diogenes doing again?" You know. Diogenes, somebody asked him, Diogenes, why do you have a lantern in the day? Don't you realize candles should be kept for the night? Diogenes is like, I'm looking for an honest man. And that's the thing. He was looking for what was real in the moment. And the only way you will care for the real if you have experienced yourself as real. If you're unreal to yourself, you will become bored because you're waiting for something external to define you. Really, people think that, let me tell you, sometimes I've wondered about the Western ideal of true love. For example, as we hear it in the stories of pretty much those who are destined to be with one another, we kind of see this true love. What is it? It's an ability to coexist in the same moment with another mind. And you see, the concept of marriage has been totally taken out of context. Because marriage, it got devoured by the cultural program of our modernity too soon. It was the simple idea that it takes a lifetime to get to know someone. Do you know? And there's a sort of co-creation. There was like this idea that when minds are present in the moment, the revelatory threshold is higher. You see, pretty much, these are the options. 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, okay? These 8 billion creatures, they can continue to remain animalistic. We can act savage, regardless of how much. For example, you look at ancient mysticism and you try it as a being born, after, like in 1991, you see, like, how can I tell you? Something real is in front of us right now as a species. It's a potential. We are not great yet. We are not great as a species yet. We are greatness in the making, and what that means is more than warriors and rebels and chaos. Man has to, in some sense, look chaos in the eyes and be like, oh, chaos, you have not seen the order. But what is this order? It is the vision of evolution. That means if you're a human being who believes in evolution, and then you're still trying to see a purpose to life, it's like then you don't believe in evolution. Because we are evolving beyond all that we know. That is the joy of life. It's the speed of it, right? And we'll realize violence slows down the speed of the greatness of the human mind. It's just dissonance, it's turbulence. Imagine we're 8 billion pilots navigating the meaning of our world. And the more conflict there is, the more turbulence there are, because it's in, like, you can even see it in a multidimensional state. That means, for me, you know how many ways my mind, same way you go through different rooms in your life. In Japan, there's a saying, the man is the room he's in. That means you as a being are defined by your environment, not just defined by how you see the environment. That means you can't go beside a dumpster and then smell a bouquet of roses and be like, okay, this doesn't just smell like roses. So it's like, that's the thing. It's kind of like how Rumi would say, Your task is not to seek love, but to get rid of all the barriers you have made against it. That means it's as if the greatest evolution of the human being is to realize what your eyes were made for. You see, all civilizations are prone to perversion. And what that means is in the dissension of the value of the image. That's it. Because you see, it's like a person. You're taking one step forward or you're taking one step back. You see, just because we stepped out of the cave doesn't mean we can't be pushed back in. And the more the world becomes technological, the less we are involved in it. So the less human beings are involved in their own consequences of their reality, the less human they will feel. And that's the issue of the technological revolution that's going to happen in 2050. That it's great. I don't have any super intelligence, and AI is a great invention of man. The inventor in me is like, holy shit, let's see what it looks like, about AI. But on another level, I think about the users of technology. And I remember my uncle telling me a story about how my uncle and my father, when they were young, they took my grandpa's car, and my uncle was 13. And they tried to drive the car, my uncle, and the car crashed into another car. And it was like this intensity that for that 13-year-old mind, that 13-year-old mind couldn't in some sense adjust. Sometimes you learn from people more than you learn from what they say. Like, I can't tell you how many things I can consider as teachings that it's just been me observing behavior and not fearing to see the design, really. That's it. It's like you're alive once. There's no point of fear. There's no point of regret. It's a temporary physicality, but while you're this physical thing, there's the projection of a mind. The mind is like a candle in a dark room that has suddenly been lit after 4 billion years of evolution. And people, it's like this. It's like you don't just evolve the self. The world has to evolve, or the self feels it's in an artificial world. So here's the thing. If your self projects a world before the world has changed to that world, you will feel you're in a simulation. That means if you can say when fear comes in the present moment, let's say you're in some situation, and here, I'll tell you this. When I was young, like you can say 7, not 7, I think I was 11, maybe. Anyways, I was in my house in Iran, and I was sleeping, and it was this strange time where it was between, I would say, 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. It was between 3 a.m. to like 4 a.m. Like that time, it wasn't that. It was like maybe 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. at night. No, it wasn't 2 to 3. Anyways, let's say 2 to 4. It was sometime there at night where I was just a little kid, and I suddenly wake up and I'm walking in my hallway, and when I walk in my hallway, I see this strange entity. I see this sort of being that I've never seen before. My mind has never in my lifetime conceived that sort of shape to a creature, to an entity. It was so unique that it was as if like, and I had felt this intense fear. Then I suddenly woke up in my bed and I realized I had a dream of my own room, and that there was a fear there. I've definitely experienced fear, and of course everybody feels fear in physical reality when something intense occurs, but like in regards to dream states, I've also felt observed the archetype of fear in that moment. And that archetype of fear was the birth of the hidden strength. That means after some point, I think the human psychology will look at this world and be like, oh my God, it can totally appear in so many combinations. Look at all the different ways I can move in three-dimensional space. Even all those people going to work the same day, you see, imagine you went and did the same thing as you did yesterday. How would we separate the two? We separated with the fourth dimension of time. Now Mr. Within is taking the mystical crossroad, like science has a sort of interpretation of the fifth dimension. This is Mr. Within's. I'm sharing my view of the fifth dimension onwards. The fifth dimension is when you observe time, and the moment you observe time, you don't exist as an individual anymore. You exist as all the fathomable moments of your conception. That means a certain chunk of the unconscious suddenly becomes like an avalanche made conscious, and you suddenly, rhythms find you. And when these rhythms find you, they find the honest eyes. That means I'm telling you, here's the thing. We right now are treating this whole cosmos like like just a rock. When the world is no longer stuff, and life is perceived as this cosmic activity, this process, then there is no, like, the idea of resistance doesn't even engage. You see, anytime you want something where a part of you subconsciously feels it doesn't deserve, and you continue in that, it's as if the life is like, why don't you go to what you deserve? You know? And then if the person found a state of mind where they feel they deserve the state of mind, they could be their simple self in that state of mind, then that's where the Logos' voice can be heard. Okay, welcome guys, my attention came to the chat section. So welcome Ultimate Creations. Honestly, so many people in the chat section have epic names. So Ultimate Creations, I guess this is a Q&A segment in the middle of the talk. So guys, Ultimate Creations, I'm going to engage your comment. So Ultimate Creation says, how can I make negative spirits from harassing me? My friends say I need to find a hobby. I do go for walks, I pray, but I still hear these negative spirits. They have gone away a little bit when I pray. Jesus, to get rid of them. This invisible realm I hear is not what I wanted to deal with in my life. I wouldn't wish what I hear against my enemies. This realm. Okay. They would freak out. So Ultimate Creation says, how can life energy exist in the invisible realm and I can hear, but in existence on earth it doesn't transpire for others to hear? Okay, so Ultimate Creations, do you want me to share my view on your answer, on your question? If you do, say yes, and I'll share my view. Okay, so just a second, guys. The sun is, I gotta pull the curtain. The sun's kind of in my eye. Here's the thing. On some level, you gotta consider kind of like How do you know you're visible? How do you know you're a visible entity? There are codependent ideas. That means if I think of suddenly a good self, I will think of a bad self. So before ultimate creations, before attending, let's say before we look at the situation of your story, let's look at the idea of good and evil. Let's look at the idea of negative and positive. Okay? Carl Jung spoke about the conscious and unconscious. You may have gone through some experiences that have made you aware of your unconscious. But the issue is that you're keeping the relationship alive. That means you still haven't, let me say it like this. Imagine person A, okay? Person A is in a park. And then let's say in another parallel dimension, there is entity B, person B. Person B in another parallel dimension sees person A. Person A doesn't see person B, but when person B chooses to see, this entity chooses to introduce itself or whatever, let me tell you this. You are creating the alphabet of ideology to move in your altered states. So I'm saying that if you ask yourself who is afraid, and you ask really who in this moment is afraid, who is perceiving this multidimensionality, who is seeing this negativity, this positivity, you will notice there's a witness, there's a presence. The Buddha, in his inner realms, he perceived so many arrows of all the negative archetypes in his mind be thrown at him, be shot at him. And he turned all these arrows into lotus flowers because he realized he was the host of his experience. So the thing is, like, we don't want to say, we don't know. There could be parallel dimensions. The concept of the seven skies is a suggestion that it's like seven parallel realities, onion style. Do you know? That means maybe there's greater civilizations on Earth, but we don't see them. They're in a parallel dimension. Different ways the civilization has occurred. Okay? So on some level, you realize you are left to the judgment of your own experience. So it's kind of like before wondering about the character in the story, we're like, what is happening or who is here? And anytime you have been pushed out of your choice, that means some perception convinced you that the mind is being defined by something outside of itself. There's this, do you know, when I was in Iran, I heard stories of exorcism. I'm not going to share it here, but I'm telling you, I heard ideas and stories of people doing these ceremonies. Like, I was like 15 when somebody told me that. It was weird. I don't know how I was even in the room to hear that. But it was like, it was something that, here's the thing. I want you to imagine that in some sense we fast forward life. Imagine having an aerial view and perceiving your life fast forwarded. You would externally see yourself in some sense limited by the inner realms. No. You see, an inner realm can't have per se just an external solution. That means you can't distract yourself from something that you subconsciously believe. You believe, on some level it's real for you that something negative is harassing you, ultimate creations. Right? You're saying something is doing this. What does that mean? That means like something's poking you from somewhere you can't see. That means that you are in an archetype that is choosing to see the world in that way. But I'm telling you, think of it this way, ultimate creations. When you were 10 years old, what self were you? That means when your self changes, what self is anything influencing? At the end of the day, it's your attention moving in the room of manifestation. And you can choose where you want. Some people, sometimes in these talks, I give myself freedom to kind of become very ungrounded, you know? But sometimes in life, you gotta instantly come to the ground. That means you gotta choose what you want to see first. You have chosen to see your inner realms first, then the objective realm. If your inner realms freak you out, stay in your objective realms. You don't have to go to your inner realms. Just focus on, in some sense, I'm just saying it this way. If you were wondering about, if I was personally just wondering about how in one moment I was reacting and responding to a situation, I would see that my eyes are my eyes. And when you realize your eyes are your eyes, that is the truth of truths. That means nothing can push you out of your eyes. Do you know? Really. You can't. On some level, the notion is that it's a given movement. So fear is projected. That's the whole thing of wondering that if the mind is in its own dimension, you are choosing to see what disturbs the objective realm. It's like you are choosing to define the filter and the spectrum of how the phenomena can animate. You see, it's like this. You gotta ask yourself you gotta wonder about how you're reacting to the situation with the idea that there's negative spirits harassing you, and you have to also wonder what it would be like to be in a moment where these ideas, before these ideas ever existed, before the concept of a negative spirit existed, were there negative spirits? Before you were born, was there this ideology? This ideology is being inhabited. You just have to tell the story differently, ultimate creations, and your experience will be aligned. So I would say, let me tell you the Zen story. I don't know how I kind of shared my analysis before actually giving you a proper answer, ultimate creations. But really, what it is that we are evolving. We evolve to have minds. And on some level, sure, you could think of it as something you're afraid and something's bothering you. But on another level, you're like, oh my God, it took me 4 billion years of evolution to be able to experience reality. Right? And reality, when you don't want to be an explorer, you feel it's pushing you. So you just pretty much have to be conscious and confront it. Because if there is fear, ultimate creations, here's the thing. If you have fear, go quickly open that door of fear. Go quickly open that door of fear. Go see what it is. If something is communicating, wonder why it's there. One of the most fascinating ways I have kind of refreshed my browser of life in various moments of my life, when I was in some sense being judged, or there was something intensity, or there was some sort of unfairness, it was some sort of self-questioning where I suddenly, it was as if I would instantly just go into my inner realms and close my eyes and then just be in that bunker of simplicity, and then just that suddenly express. So what I'm saying is that don't be afraid to communicate with how your mind is happening is the moment. That's the privilege of the life. We're not here to fear the unknown. That means don't fear the unknown. Don't call them negative spirits. It's esoterically rude. It's mystically rude. Let me tell you why. Because they are alive. That means, do you care for that squirrel on the branch? If a squirrel came, would you give it food? Or if a pigeon was nearby and was staring at you, would you be like, all right, pigeon, here, have this tiny piece of bread from my shawarma? You know? You know, so it would be as if you suddenly realize life is alive. That means, think of it this way. Think as if instead of a negative spirit, some people, when I speak about violence, that's negative people. Do you see what I mean? That means if you consider people have a spirit, so that you could say it's like a negative person is a negative spirit. You know? Technically. So I'm saying that on some sense, you have to stop worshipping the language that is defining your experience. Free your inner realms. You have to free those negative spirits from your attention. You have to free them. Do you know? Your attention is onto them. Do you know? So many people think that it's just something they have to do. It's more like something you gotta let go. Just let it go, like an iceberg. Suddenly a chunk of it disconnects from the rest and slowly goes into the ocean. You gotta let life move on. Thoughts, don't take your inner realms. I said be playful with your inner realms, ultimate creations. Do you know? Because Chung Tzu said they're like leaves on a tree, they change. You're going to see today the way you perceive that negative spirit yesterday was different than how you perceive it today, and it's going to be different tomorrow, and it's going to be different the day after, and you're going to be like, okay, it's this endless negative spirits of interpretation. You know, so on some level, relax whenever, if you feel there is something unique in the attention of your moment, in your space, because this is a world we're in, guys. Just because we're in physical rooms doesn't mean if reality was multidimensional, we wouldn't feel anything in our room. Do you know? The thing is that if you're in the unknown, be simple. Be simple and immediately just go into the simple and honest self. Abide is the simple and honest self, then whatever imposes, check it out. It's like there's a sort of strange karma to this life in the yogic mind. This karma meant that if you're in a moment of existence and you don't have violent intention but something else does, and you don't retaliate, you don't go into the similar state of mind as that violence, then strangely there's this kind of weird way field in our karmic field in our universe that will make that being unable to touch you. Do you see? That means let life be alive in many ways, but you don't have to touch the thought. You don't have to engage. Observe. When something happens, observe. You know, when something intense happens, just shout at the world, all right, what do I need to look at now? You know? And also, you got to think of it this way, that it's kind of like a 50-50. If you're an eternal being, there's no, like, what could bother you, you know? And if you're a temporary being, after the temporary existence and projection, what could bother you? So after some point, we know the end of suffering is the end of existence, the end of physical suffering. But we also see it's like the beginning of the mind. The mind is it's always running. Do you know? In one of my science fiction notes, I kind of thought of developing the universe where, in the mythology of the character in this kind of version of Earth, they felt that God, in some sense, had opened a valve. And so for them, there was no kind of religious pattern. It was just as if, like, this unknown valve was released and there was a mechanical definition. That means as if God made a machine that endlessly released creation into the world. You know, like a valve, you open a valve and water is poured out, you know. And in the mythology of the people, they were kind of like trying to, in their kind of mystical psychological analysis of why this design of form, they came to this conclusion that they were made. Some people believed in that world that they were made in the image of the valve, the machine that God made. Some people believed they were the God using the machine, you know. And so there's various paradigms. It's really geometric. Knowledge is geometric. You see, it's about this. Pretty much either the self changes or the world changes. Either you change as a being and the negative beings don't bother you, or the world changes, the negative beings don't bother you. There's two ways really that the concept or the context changes. The unknown is the context where the known concept is found. You right now are a known concept to yourself. Right now I'm speaking, I'm a person. I'm saying that once we imagine there were the objective realms, and for eons we explored it, and suddenly we realized there's the subjective realms, and for eons we explored the subjective realms, and suddenly we realized there's the unknown witness, and then when we abided by the unknown witness, we discovered ourselves as the world that's moving before the person is. So I'm saying, in some sense, you know who Guru Padmasambhava was? Ultimate Creations, I hope you're listening. Guru Padmasambhava is uh, was this Tibetan enlightened Buddhic figure, Bodhisattva, and he in some sense would go town to town, towns where that they had irrigation problems, like agricultural issues with like droughts and whatnot, and he would go. This was written in Tibetan Buddhism, where he would go and fight off evil spirits that were blocking the weather of that environment, and he would convert them to Buddhism. He was this dude, this enlightened dude, just walking by, converting chaotic, you know, ecosystems into, you know, conscious Buddhic fields. You know, he was stretching the Buddhic field, you know. So that's what I'm saying. So Guru Padmasambhava, think of like there's people that in some sense I've you don't know, there was when I went to Iran, there was a driver who in some sense took me 2 hours drive to this place called Shomon, north of Iran. And this was in 2016, and on the whole way I was silent and he was speaking. And he was speaking as if like this person hadn't spoken to someone for a lot, or he was just like dying to speak, you know? I mean, we're all dying technically to speak, but but it's he was saying he was saying, I mean, of course energy has its eternalhood, guys, but this poor guy felt that he had been unfortunate, and this guy with supernatural powers had kinda made his soul descend. Okay? His words were way different. I don't want to share his words, but it was like that was the idea. He felt that something supernatural was pushing him back, you know? And as he was saying it, he was saying it so much, and I remember just telling him this quote from Hafez, where he says, the words you speak become the reality you live in. That means ultimate creations. By writing down how I can make negative spirits from harassing me, you're in some sense accepting that inner realm. So that's what Hafiz meant by the words you speak become the house you live in. That you have to pilot your attention by realizing it's the freedom before it finds it. That's the whole point of having free will, by the way. That freedom is authorized experientially. So that's the thing, you know. You see, on some level, we all need stories to get by, and we tend to kind of make our life into a story, and we can zoom into any sort of its details animated. You know, there will come a time, I think, where people will realize that their inner realms are an opportunity to imbue life to the moment. You know, there's this cup of tea in front of me right now. I could suddenly feel like this cup of tea is like this, has a voice, and this cup of tea is talking to me, like, don't drink me. You know, I could totally animate that. Do you see? But my whole thing is that my approach to the inner realms is that we can't be ignorant, so it means we have to be honest. And to be honest means to really wonder where your eyes started from. That's the liberation of the inner child. People feel like there's this concept in psychology of the inner child, and that means the person, when they were a kid, they didn't get to experience certain things. They grew up, and that feeling from their past is burning them inside in regards to who they are in the present. And so the inner child, you have to release it. You got to be like, all right, thanks, thanks for being my inner child. You know, now I have chosen to walk into the moment. You see, when Hoffa says words become the, what was the quote? Words become the house you live in, something like that. The words you speak become the house you live in. You are the architect of how phenomenology has meaning. You are the architect of the translation of the meaning. So if you choose to see negative spirits, nobody really knows how you're seeing that negative. You know, so really it's the responsibility of your own eyes to return and become the pilot of the moment. You know, if you feel something else is moving your moment, you will feel you can always give it a personality. Think of it this way. The self moves the world moves the self. Now, when the world moves the self from what it knows into the unknown, that unknown self, because it's experiencing an unknown self, may consider an unknown world. Free your eyes, because freedom is what's here, really. That's the evolution. That's what all technologies are striving for. You know, that means there was an inventor. Imagine with science, through science, there was this chaotic technology. And there was this kid who shed a tear when he realized the chaos of the technological realm. And he's like, I'm going to invent this invention. It's going to invent order till the end of time. Right? So the kid made an invention as if they had made a chaotic robot. And suddenly this kid made this ordered robot. Right? And it was as if, like, how can I tell you? It's the counter culture. It's realizing everything evolves, everything grows. So fear even changes. The fear of yesterday is not the fear of today. So what is fear? You know, I wrote this savage sentence once where I said, kill fear before it kills you. That means it's much more efficient when something unknown happens to just authentically pay attention to it and see what it is, than to just cower away in a sort of idea about it. That means it's like that moment where the person felt as if there was another being in the room, and he roared like a lion, as if, what's in the room? Show yourself to me. And he realized his mind is the room. You know? So I feel that There's nothing literally to fear. Fear is nothing. Fear is not a thing. It's not physical. You know? I feel that it's like this, ultimate creations. Either we see the world as a singular dimension or a multidimensional. You know? When you go into religion, when you ask about the soul from a religious man, they'll be like, it's the secret of God. No further questions, you know? That's the view. It's the unknown. You have to realize whatever you are storifying your relationship with the unknown. Now it's your free will that is piloting the meaning. And it's sometimes cool. That means I've had moments where most people tend to fear it, but for me it's like, oh my God, if this world is multidimensional, let's see this multidimensionality. Let's see how reality is. Because you don't know, and I will tell you, mysticism, once infused with desire, becomes chaos's soul. So you gotta kind of be chill about how life is also living its life. You gotta let life happen, and then you watch it. And you don't have to always move it, but you whenever you realize it's moving, the self is your free will. It took you 4 billion years to be able to be conscious, you know? And like the person's like, no, there's negativity, I don't want to be conscious. I'm joking, of course, but like what I'm saying is, we gotta care. You gotta care for your own strength, or you'll never see what it's like. You gotta care for your intelligence, or you'll never see what it is. I'm telling you, Papa G, some guy came to Papa G and was like, Papa G, my past is fucked up. You know, I don't know what to do. You know, I'm always going to the past. What do I do? And Papa G was like, the past is past. Next question. I mean, Papa G just said like that, but you know what I mean? Like, he said the past is past. So that means, right now, that sentence you wrote is past. So what negative entities? You see what I mean? That's the power of the novelty of the moment. Don't give, like, it's not don't give. It's like this. It's like, first the world hits you. I'm telling you, that's just evolution. The world hits you. You're young, you hit it back. Then the world hits you again. You hit it back. Then the world hits you again, then you stop hitting it. Then when you stop hitting it, the world hits you again. Then the world hits you again. Then the world hits you again. Then you realize you have let the world hit you to such a degree that in some sense you can't move anymore. And that's when the undefeatable self is found. When the lowest is okay for the mind, then the highest is okay. If you're not comfortable with the weak, you can't be comfortable with the strong. That means, like, there's a level of fear even in the intellectual domain, and the fear of it is the fear of that what if we are actually a higher dimensional being that is inconceivable to all the ways that language is developed. So anyways, I hope that was a good answer, because if you know, your name is Ultimate Creations, so that means the ultimate is here before anything else is. So the ultimate awareness of creation is that kind of, you can say there's the Buddhic mind and the Bodhisattva mind. Siddhartha's Buddhic approach and Guru Padmasambhava's Bodhisattva approach. The Bodhisattva approach is coming down from the mountain of enlightenment. The Buddhic approach is going up the mountain of enlightenment. Any person who wants to be like the Buddha, they want to just have their self. They want to find the paradise for the individual's consciousness. They haven't realized that their individual consciousness is simultaneously existing collectively. That our minds, that our brains are antennas. and that our eyes are opened through our mind beyond the sensory. And it's okay. That's the whole point of evolution. In 1,000 years, we hope it to be so much more next level than this. So don't fear anything now. All designs change. All designs are like armies marching into the unknown, and time is the grand conqueror. That means if you want to see an enemy in this life, every person has one common enemy, and that is time. And time is like running towards you, and you're marching in towards the kind of black abyss. And in that moment, there is the meaning of life found. It's the evocation of the soul of the design. So that's when I say every human being, your DNA is like an instrument. And so when you live life, at some point this instrument activates. And when this instrument activates, then you suddenly realize the inner realms are the responsibility of the collective mind. So literally you don't become a thought anymore. You can't be. You realize you never were a thought. And even if you were a thought, how can a thought think of another thought? It's like how can hollowness, create hollowness? It's hollow from the beginning. And that's what I want to see. I envisioned it in the future. I saw as if for certain this may arise, that I called this concept elemental units. Right now I feel there's going to come this tidal waves of philosophical questioning as technology becomes more intense and more intense. It's like the more the building rises, the more deeper, significant the consequences of its falling is. It's like cutting. It's like the lumberjack who was about to hit the last axe. Axe hit. Imagine, guys, I think this would be the best Axe commercial ever, okay? Where they show this lumberjack kind of cut this sequoia, and there's this one last axe hit left before the sequoia falls, and instead of hitting it with an axe, the guy takes an axe spray and sprays that edge of the sequoia, and the sequoia tree falls, I think that's a interesting Axe commercial, I would like to see that, We're going to be ushered into a new wave of experiencing ourselves as minds. Our minds have been individual from the beginning of time, in the sense that it was this unconscious movement of matter. And this unconscious movement of matter and nature in some sense became conscious of itself. But it became conscious of itself, I call this the objective evolution, where in some sense the legs designed limbs. We started walking on the earth. That was the emergence of the first individual. That means, on some sense, for me, the anthropos is the objective evolution of legs existing in the world. Design of limbs. Like, look at your hand and legs and your body. Like there's a skeleton being you right now. This is a complex design. Now, why, for example, 5 fingers? And there's so many explanations. It's not that it has one answer that's going to rule them all, Lord of the Rings style. It's just like. It's just you gotta refascinate your mind back into your world. That means the mysticism that forgets the world to be enlightened was never in the world in the first place. We have to find this strange redemption of at least abiding by the rhythm of, after the objective evolution, suddenly this creature that was now separate from the earth, that was no longer the earth growing, was now growing separately on the earth, and it began becoming open to a field of decisions. So the objective evolution, eventually the creature walked in front of some pond or saw its shadow or saw something and suddenly began emerging as an individual to itself. Suddenly the subjective evolution began where they don't teach in schools and they should, that you have a mind in the room, not just a body. that there's something alive here and it has a value and its value is unknown, and if it's defined by your world you won't feel you have free will. If it's defined by you feel you have free will. That's pretty much it. If you don't, if it's all about that inner care to engage, or that inner care to just simply see what happens. That means anytime, by the way, something I'll tell you, the mind, there's this something that even if you do see something negative interdimensionally, you can always zoom out. You can zoom out of it instantly. The inner realms are evocational. It's like the person's like the darkest beings communicated to me and I offered them cake and they suddenly transformed. You know what I mean? Like, reality is playful, but we have to, in some sense, every person, of course, your eyes and your karma and the way reality is. I mean, in some sense, I don't have your eyes' ultimate creations. So the greatest answer to your moment actually comes from your own realization of your situation. But just know one thing, that we're in a changing universe, so it doesn't really make sense to freak out too much, you know. Terrence McKenna has this quote. He says, "Nobody knows enough to worry." You know, it's like they're like, "Hey man, why is this guy so relaxed?" He's like, "Because I don't know enough to worry, man." So, anyways, I'm gonna get back to the talk, guys, and probably, actually, guys, I need a quick breather. So I'll be back in a minute. I'll be back. Okay, guys, I'm back. Anyways, guys, I'm just gonna pretty much kind of share the idea of the 7th Transcendent is pretty much what we do after we have gone through our principal universal philosophy, primordial universal philosophy, that which was before the before, and we realize what that is. We will eventually come to a state where we will realize we were never the archetype. When we realize we're not the archetype, we become a field. When we become a field, you become free will in the motion of the world. So your mind right now is just identifying with the movement of your body. But imagine right now being a guy on the street where something messed up is happening and suddenly Superman rushes in and defends the weak. So what happens there is like suddenly the person witnesses something else in their moment that is equivalent to their own value. And that's how civilization advances, where we get access to these collective archetypes. And these collective archetypes are not emerged out of our personal story. It's as if there came this philosopher and he saw every problem in the world and suddenly said, let us see it as myth. And what I mean by that is that we suddenly made these kind of, like, sometimes it's like this. It's like, if you want to get children to solve the world's problems, you tell them it's like a dragon you gotta slay. The kid's mind will be like, a dragon, oh my god, let's go slay this dragon, and this dragon is world hunger. Do you see? So what that means is the problem can be animated in a way it can be engaged. And I'm trying to tell people that you can project even geometrically, and geometry is a very, you can say, pure way of navigating in the inner realms geometrically. But how it happens is you don't really touch it, because if you move first in the inner realms, you won't know what is you and what is the other. So you gotta let the invisible other take the first dance move, and then you start dancing. And the rhythm of the unknown moves the known. And you realize that every breath is like it's showtime. That means my breath is live streaming my mind every moment that, of my being. So, guys, I want to share something that I found kind of online that I think is interesting. It's from, what is it from? It's from a gospel, and it comes to us from Christianity, and it's Numbers 10:9-10. When you go to war in your land against the enemy who oppresses you, then you shall sound an alarm with the trumpets, and you will be remembered before the Lord your God, and you will be saved from your enemies. That is interesting that God remembers two when he hears the sound of a trumpet. That's in brackets. And then it says, also in the day of your gladness, in your appointed feasts, at the beginning of your months, you shall blow the trumpet over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, and they shall be a memorial for you before your God. I am the Lord your God. Um, there should be something about the seventh trumpet here. Sorry guys, just a second, let me see if I can find this. It's this ultimate, it's this idea of the ultimate in every faith, in every ideological system. They have something ultimate which the intensity of their animate individuality is projected. That means the reason ideas kind of endure past the test of time is because they have attempted the ultimate. I'm trying to see if there's a parallel to the seventh trumpet and the seventh sky. Okay, so there's this passage that says wait, it says, and I looked, and it's from Revelation 14:16, and it says, and I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, thrust in thy sickle, and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap. For the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. I mean, honestly, when you look at the evolution of stories, it's things happening to the self and then things happening to the world. And anytime something that's happening to the world that in some sense happens to the self simultaneously, when the inner event and the outer event are the same, then it becomes a sort of, you can say, two eyes that see the same. It's fascinating for me, guys. Reality is pretty much like we're in this giant mind and we're all like prospectors and we're wondering what the meaning of reality is. You know? I want to share with you the quotes of this man named Meister Eckhart. He was a Gnostic priest, like a German theologian. So, in this quote tunnel, Meister Eckhart says, if the only prayer you ever say in your life is thank you, it will be enough. Meister Eckhart says the most important hour is always the present. The most significant person is precisely the one sitting across from you right now. The most necessary work is always love. Meister Eckhart says, what good is it to me that Mary gave birth to the Son of God 1400 years ago, and I do not also give birth to the Son of God in my time and in my culture? We're all meant to be mothers of God. God is always needing to be born. Whoa. Meister Eckhart says the only thing that burns in hell is the part of you that won't let go of your life, your memories, your attachments. They burn them all away, but they're not punishing you, they're freeing your soul. If you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing your life away. If you've made your peace, then the devils are really angels freeing you from the earth. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. That's really true. It's true in the sense that you're piloting your attention. So if your attention is in fear, then everywhere you look, you'll be afraid. You'll look at a pencil, you know, if you're in a state of fear, you'll look at a pencil and you'll be afraid. It's too sharp, you know. And suddenly you know it's time to start something new and trust the magic of beginnings. Meister Eckhart says that. Meister Eckhart says, above all else, know this. Be prepared at all times for the gifts of God, and be ready always for new ones. For God is 1,000 times more ready to give than we are to receive. Meister Eckhart says there is a huge silence inside each of us that beckons us into itself. And the recovery of our own silence can begin to teach us the language of heaven. Wow, wow, wow. That sentence is it, guys. This sentence has to be in the description section of this. Meister Eckhart says, become aware of what is in you, announce it, pronounce it, produce it, and give birth to it. Meister Eckhart says the most powerful prayer, one well nigh omnipotent, oh my god, I can't even. The most powerful prayer, one well nigh omnipotent, and the worthiest work of all, is the outcome of a quiet mind. The quieter it is, the more powerful, the worthier, the deeper, the more telling and more perfect the prayer is. To the quiet mind, all things are possible. What is a quiet mind? A quiet mind is one which nothing weighs on, nothing worries, which, free from ties and from all seeking, all self-seeking, is wholly merged into the will of God and dead to its own. Wow. Meister Eckhart says, be willing to be a beginner every single morning. Meister Eckhart says, what we plant in the soil of contemplation, we shall reap in the harvest of action. Meister Eckhart says, for the person who has learned to let go and let be, nothing can ever get in the way again. Meister Eckhart says, it is in the darkness that one finds the light. Meister Eckhart says, spirituality is not to be learned by flight from the world, or by running away from things, or by turning solitary and going apart from the world. Rather, we must learn an inner solitude wherever or with whoever we may be. We must learn to penetrate things and find God there. That's exactly what Carl Jung was doing by wanting to go explore the unconscious, the collective unconscious. Carl Jung says, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You have to study your mind. It is the privilege of a lifetime. You know, nobody has your eyes, you know. That's the cool thing. Your inner realms are yours. They're yours because you see it, you know. If others see it, that's the sharing of the inner realms. That's when language and advanced communication is bridging these inner realms. And then suddenly we advance the empire of human consciousness in this vast void. Meister Eckhart says, wisdom consists in doing the next thing you have to do, doing it with your... Okay, wisdom consists in doing the next thing you have to do. It's misspelled here. Wisdom consists in doing the next thing you have to do, doing it with your whole heart and finding delight in doing it. Meister Eckhart says, theologians may quarrel, but the mystics of the world speak the same language. Meister Eckhart says, love will never be anywhere except where equality and unity are. And there can be no love where love does not find equality, or is not busy creating equality, nor is there any pleasure without equality. Practice equality in human society. Learn to love, esteem, consider all people like yourself. What happens to another, be it bad or good, pain or joy, ought to be as if it had happened to you. As if it happened to you. Guys, that's very true. That's the emergence of the collective mind. That's pretty much the psychology, the great transformation for the psychology of human minds I share. In Civilization 2.0 is my idea that in 600 years, all human infrastructure, we're going to go live in our skies pretty much, in sky cities. Meister Eckhart says, the eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. My eye and God's eye, one seeing, one knowing, one love. Meister Eckhart says, whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, secretly all nature seeks God and works toward, in brackets, God. Meister Eckhart says, apprehend God in all things, for God is in all things. Every single creature is full of God and is a book about God. Every creature is a word of God. You know, that means the simulation of the will of the unknown, I guess. Meister Eckhart says, stillness is where creativity and solutions are found. Meister Eckhart says, the beast that bears you fastest to perfection is suffering. Wow. Between God and me, there is no between. Wow. He says, treat all things as if they were loaned to you with any ownership, whether body or soul, sense or strength, external goods or honors, house or hall, everything. The more deeply we are our true selves, the less self is in us. Wow. And guys, there's 10 more pages of these quotes, but I'm going to end the quote. might of the 7th Transcendent, the evolution of thought in the space-time continuum, and the mystery of consciousness now opening up to a multidimensional lens of perceiving reality. We are either figuring it out or realizing that it's too big to figure out. Now, life can have many directions, but I feel on some level the opportunity is rare. That means one thing we know for certain is that the human existence is temporary. You know, we're not immortal physically, you know. In the future, they might have some kind of like soda drink called immortal drink or something. It's just all attention is moving somewhere. There's an opportunity to see collectively what the potential would be. We evolved from savage animals where the ecosystem was our imagination to now becoming the dictators of our inner realms. And so in some sense, everybody is a king of their own attention to some degree. Now the idea is, what kingdom is this attention living for? What external, it's like when you look at external reality, what is important? For me, for example, as a human being, I looked at externality and I was like, okay, like I could do physical labor throughout the day, just dive into the artisan life, you know? Or I could kind of in some sense realize what is echoing longer and what is valuable to share, not just for the economical system, not just for the educational system, but when I look at the world, what do I care about? And I found an answer to that question, and that was to figure out what the inner realms were. And as I pursued that question of wondering who I am, it suddenly took me to where I was like, all right, let's see what other people have said. And then I looked into the eyes of different philosophers, the way their languages, they had used language, and it just blew my mind. Sometimes for me, how a sentence is written is as fascinating as seeing the most, unique building ever designed. Do you know what I mean? Like it has an architecture, right? So suddenly it's like we're all no longer just creatures in tribes of their own fighting over what their beliefs are. We are all 8 billion creatures on a rock, and the unknown is everywhere, and we are building our knowledge, you know? So you gotta care for like the world, and then the world, you can perceive its movement, something like that. Whether we are in one room, whether we're in multiple rooms, whether all these rooms are in emptiness, whether it's just one room in emptiness, whether their emptiness is a coin and we can't see the other side, reality is a certain given privilege. And I feel it has to be a sort of thing where it's at least 10% of every human being's life should go towards their civilization somehow. You know? So anyways, guys, I hope this talk was helpful. I'm going to open it up to Q&A, and if nobody has questions, then I'll just move on. But so Q&A is open if anybody wants to ask anything or something. The talk's pretty much over.